All right, today's gospel reading will be from John chapter 1, verses 35 through 51. And as always, I'll be doing the explanation according to the Blessed Theophylact, who is an archbishop from the Ohrid region of Bulgaria from the 11th century. 35 through 37. The next day, John again stood, and two of his disciples, and looking upon Jesus as he walks, he saith, Behold, the Lamb of God. And the two disciples heard him speak, and they followed Jesus. The explanation here. The laziness of his listeners compelled John to repeat his words of testimony. Behold, the Lamb of God. And by this good repetition, he brought two disciples to Christ. The purpose of everything John did, as the escort of the bride, was to lead human nature to the bridegroom. Christ, the bridegroom, is silent, for he who arranges the marriage does all the talking. At a wedding, the bride does not approach the bridegroom, but the bridegroom the bride, even if he is the son of the king. So it is here that the Lord, as the bridegroom, presents himself to the multitude. Intending to unite with our human nature as with a bride, the Lord came down to earth, and after the wedding ascended with our humanity to his Father's house. Looking upon Jesus and expressing with his eyes his amazement and joy, John exclaimed, Behold, the Lamb! The hearts of John's disciples were softened by his oft-repeated testimony, and some of them followed Jesus. So doing, they did not reject John, but rather obeyed him who bore witness to one greater, Christ. Verses 38 to 39. Then Jesus turned and saw them following, and saith unto them, What seek ye? They said unto him, Rabbi, which is to say, being interpreted, Master, or Teacher, where dwellest thou? He saith unto them, Come and see. They came and saw where he dwelt, and abode with him that day, for it was about to the 10th hour. The explanation here. Matthew relates that immediately after his baptism, the Lord went up. Matthew relates that immediately after his baptism, the Lord went up to the mountain to be tempted. But the evangelist John passes over the events Matthew has already recorded, and instead gives an account of what occurred when the Lord descended from the mountain. Therefore, the events related here when John stood with two of his disciples as Jesus approached took place after the Lord was tempted and returned from the mountain. This shows, I believe, that no teacher should teach others until he has himself reached the pinnacle of virtue. This is the mountain. Overcome every temptation and raise the trophy of victory over the tempter. First, the disciples follow him. Then they ask where he is living, for it was inappropriate to discuss mundane matters in front of a crowd. The disciples did not speak first. Rather, Christ drew the question from them. He asked, What seek ye? Already knowing the answer, for this is he who knows the hearts of men, and inviting them by his question to say what they were wondering. It is likely they were both embarrassed and fearful of Jesus, having heard John explain that he was greater than any ordinary man. Marvel, O reader, at their openness to Christ. They followed him and called him Rabbi, which means teacher, before they have even heard him speak. They ask him where he is living because they wanted to learn from him, and it is easier to converse in a quiet, private place. The Lord does not give them directions to the house, but says only, Come and see, thereby inducing them to follow him even more eagerly, and at the same time strengthening their ardor, lest they falter on the way. If their desire to know Christ had been merely lukewarm, they would not have followed him to his house. And why, in another place, does the Lord say, The Son of Man hath not where to lay his head, in Luke 9:58? While in this passage it appears that he has a house, there is no contradiction here. When he says he hath not where to lay his head, he does not mean that he has no dwelling place at all, but he does not own a house. And when he stayed in a house, it belonged to another. The evangelist's purpose in mentioning that it was about the 10th hour, about roughly 4 p.m., it is to teach both masters and disciples not to postpone instruction because of the time of day. The teacher should not say, It is late, so we shall meet tomorrow instead, nor should the disciple delay attentive listening until the next day, but should consider any time of day or night as suitable for learning. We see that these disciples were accustomed to fasting, and their stomachs being empty, so they were able to listen attentively at an hour when others, weighed down from overeating, are unable to undertake any important task and must rest. They were true disciples of John the Faster. Observe that Jesus turns and shows his face to those who follow him. Then Jesus turned and saw them following. If you do not follow Jesus by means of good actions, you will not attain to the vision of Lord's countenance, nor will you come to his dwelling place, that is, reach the enlightenment of divine knowledge. The apostle says that he dwells in the light which no man can approach in 1 Timothy 6:16. Therefore, the abode of the Lord is light. The abode of the Lord is light. Unless a man has cleansed himself and followed Christ by leading a pure life, how can he be enlightened with knowledge? 40 through 42. One of the two which heard John speak and followed him was Andrew, Simon Peter's brother. He first findeth his own brother Simon, and saith unto him, We have found the Messiah, which is, being interpreted, the Christ. And he brought him to Jesus. And when Jesus beheld him, he said, Thou art Simon the son of Jonah. Thou shalt be called Cephas, which is by interpretation a rock. The explanation here, the evangelist gives us the name of one of the two disciples, Andrew, but not of the other. Some say that the other disciple is the same John who wrote this gospel. Others say that the other disciple is not mentioned by name because he was not one of the well-known apostles. Andrew does mention for two reasons. He is renowned, and he brought his brother to Christ. Behold, true brotherly love. Andrew does not hide from his brother the good thing he has found, but shares the treasure and cries out with joy, We have found the Messiah, for whom we have searched diligently and with longing. He does not simply say Messiah, but the Messiah, with the article indicating the true Christ. There was only one for whom they were waiting, although there were many who had been called Christs, the anointed ones, not the, and sons of God. Andrew brought Peter to Jesus. The titles Messiah of Hebrew origin and Christ of Greek both mean anointed. Kings, priests, and prophets of the Old Testament were anointed and called Christs. In Leviticus 4:5, we read about the anointed priest who has been consecrated. In Genesis 6:5, there is mention of the sons of God who begat children by the daughters of men. This does not indicate that Peter was a man easily persuaded and open to every suggestion, but on the contrary, he was keen, decisive, and fervent, and therefore readily accepted Andrew's report of Christ. It is likely that Andrew spoke with him at length and explained in detail the things he had learned about Jesus while staying with Christ. Andrew was initiated into profound mysteries. If anyone should persist in accusing Peter of being too easily persuaded, let him consider this. Nowhere is it written that Peter believed Andrew at once, but that Andrew brought him to Jesus. This indicates firmness, not gullibility. Peter did not simply believe Andrew's words, but wanted to see Christ to determine for himself if he were credible. If so, he would follow him. If not, he would take his leave. This shows a careful and discerning mind. How does the Lord respond? He makes a prediction about Peter and begins to reveal himself to him. For prophecies are no less impressive than miracles, and perhaps even more convincing. Revealing what he knows supernaturally, Christ announces, Thou art Simon, the son of Jonah. Then he foretells the future. Thou shalt be called Cephas. By revealing what is in the present, he establishes the validity of the prophecy. He did not say, I will call you Peter, but thou shalt be called. He did not wish to reveal his authority at the very beginning, because the disciples did not yet have a sure faith in him. And why does he name Peter a rock, and the sons of Zebedee sons of thunder? To show that it was he who gave the Old Testament, and as he changed names then, so does he now. For he called Abram, Abraham, and Sarai, Sarah, in Genesis 17:5 and 15. Understand, O reader, that Simon means obedience and Jonah, dove. Therefore, obedience is a child of meekness, symbolized by the dove. Simon was obedient and thus became the rock, his obedience leading him onwards to be firm and steadfast in good. Verses 43 through 45. The day following Jesus went forth into Galilee, and findeth Philip, and saith unto him, Follow me. Now Philip was of Bethsaida, the city of Andrew and Peter. Philip findeth Nathanael, and saith unto him, We have found him, of whom Moses is in the law, and the prophets did write, Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph. And the explanation here: Andrew, by listening to the forerunner, and Peter to Andrew, both followed Christ. But Philip, without the prompting of another, obeyed as soon as Jesus said to him, Follow me. How was he convinced instantaneously? First of all, the voice of the Lord stung his soul with love. The Lord's voice was unlike any other. In the worthy, it sounds straightway enkindled a burning love for Christ. As Cleopas and the other disciple on the road to Emmaus said, Did not our heart burn within us while he talked with us by the way, in Luke 24:32. Furthermore, Philip had pondered earnestly within his heart and continuously studied the books of Moses, and was always waiting for the coming of Christ. Therefore, as soon as he saw him, he recognized Jesus as the Messiah. This is why he said, We have found Jesus, which shows that he was already seeking him. Perhaps he had learned something about Christ from Andrew and Peter, because they were all from the same city. It is likely that they had talked together and discussed the Lord. The evangelist seems to imply this when he says, Now Philip was of the city of Andrew and John. Bethsaida was a very small city, more like a village. We shouldn't marvel at how Christ, in his might and omniscience, could find such eminent disciples in such insignificant places. Philip does not keep the glad news to himself, but shares it with Nathanael. Because Nathanael was a diligent student of the law and knew it thoroughly, Philip refers to him in the law and the prophets. Philip calls the Lord the son of Joseph, because the Jews thought Jesus was Joseph's son. And he says Jesus is of Nazareth, although he was, properly speaking, from Bethlehem. Christ was born in Bethlehem and raised in Nazareth. However, since his birth was hidden from most, while he was known to many as a youth, they called him Jesus of Nazareth. Verses 46 through 48. And Nathanael said unto him, Can there any good thing come out of Nazareth? Philip saith unto him, Come and see. Jesus saw Nathanael coming to him, and saith of him, Behold, an Israelite indeed, in whom there is no guile. Nathanael said unto him, Whence knowest thou me? Jesus answered and said unto him, Before Philip called thee, when thou wast under a fig tree, I saw thee. And the explanation here: Philip had said that Christ was from Nazareth, but Nathanael, accurate and exact in his knowledge of the law, knew that the Messiah should come from Bethlehem. This is why he said, Can there any good thing come out of Nazareth? Philip answered, Come and see, knowing that once Nathanael had tasted Christ's words, he would never leave him. Christ commends Nathanael for being a true Israelite who says nothing either to curry favor or to incite ill feeling. Nathanael's response stemmed not from disbelief, but from a discerning mind well versed in the law. He knew that the Christ would come from Bethlehem, not Nazareth. How does Nathanael respond? Does Christ's praise elicit conceit? Not in the least. Intent on confirming the identity of this man, he asks, Whence knowest thou me? Then the Lord reveals his divinity by speaking about things unknown to anyone except Nathanael and Philip, who had spoken privately. Although he was not present, Christ knew all that had taken place. This is why he says, When thou wast under the fig tree. The Lord said this before Philip drew near, lest it be suspected that Philip had told him about the fig tree and his conversation with Nathanael. Nathanael at once understood who the Lord was and confessed him to be the Son of God. Hear what he says in verses 49 through 51. Nathanael answered and saith unto him, Rabbi, thou art the Son of God, thou art the King of Israel. Jesus answered and said unto him, Because I said unto thee, I saw thee under the fig tree, believest thou? Thou shalt see greater things than these. And he saith unto him, Verily, verily, I say unto you, hereafter ye shall see heaven open and the angels of God ascending and descending upon the Son of Man. And the explanation here: the prophecy has great power, even greater than miracles, to move a man to believe. The demons can simulate miracles, but not even angels, and still less demons, have perfect foreknowledge and the ability to predict future events accurately. Therefore, the Lord drew Nathanael to himself by mentioning the place where he had been standing, and that Philip had called him, and by referring to him as a true Israelite. Hearing this, Nathanael sensed the greatness of the Lord and confessed him to be the Son of God. Yet the meaning of his confession was not the same as Peter's, although both men used the same words. And as you can see in Matthew 16:16 through 18, Peter meant that Jesus is the true God. Therefore, the Lord blessed Peter and entrusted the church to him. But Nathanael merely confesses Jesus to be a man who, by grace and his own virtue, has been adopted as the Son of God. As a son of God. This is clear from what he says next. Thou art the King of Israel. Do you see? Nathanael has not yet attained perfect knowledge of the true divinity of the only begotten. He believes in him as a man loved by God and as the King of Israel. If he had known Jesus to be truly God, Nathanael would not have called him the King of Israel, but the King of all. Therefore, the Lord does not bless him as he did Peter, but corrects him and leads him his thoughts upwards to comprehend something of his divinity. Ye shall see, he says, the angels of God ascending and descending upon the Son of Man. He means, do not understand me to be merely a man, but rather the master of angels. He whom the angels serve cannot be a mere man, but must be true God. What Christ predicted it did in fact take place at his crucifixion and ascension. As his passion approached, an angel from heaven strengthened him at his tomb, and again his ascension angels were present, and at his ascension angels were present, as Luke relates in Luke 22 verse 43, 24 4, 23 and verse 23, and also in Acts 1 10 and 11. Some understand the fig tree to represent the law. Like the fig tree, the law bears sweet fruit, but the fruit is hard to get at, covered over as with tough leaves by the harshness and difficulty of its regulations. They say that the Lord saw Nathanael, that is, looked down graciously upon him and knew his thoughts while he was still under the law. If it pleases you, O reader, consider this interpretation. The Lord saw Nathanael under the fig tree, that is, under the law, or immersed in the law, searching out its depths. If he had not been searching out the depths of the law, the eyes of the Lord would not have been upon him. Then the Lord went forth into a place sunk low, our fallen nature, for Galilee means rolling down, in verse 43. There the lover of man saw us under the fig tree, indulging the fruits of sin, whose sweetness conceals the bitter regrets and punishment which follow their consumption. Christ, the King of all who see God, Israel means seeing God, chose as his own those who confess him to be the Son of God. And now, if we persevere, he will count us worthy to behold even greater things, angels ascending to the height of divine knowledge of him, and descending because his essence is incomprehensible. Also, a man ascends when he raises his mind to study the divinity of the only begotten, and he descends when he contemplates the Lord's incarnation and harrowing of Hades.